You know, for the past couple of years, a different kind of war has been raging right alongside the one in Ukraine. It's this huge geopolitical showdown, but it's not being fought with bullets. It's being fought with dollars, with diplomacy, and with competing stories. So today we're going to unpack this economic war between the US and Russia, a conflict that is truly reshaping global trade and alliances. Let's get into it.
And this right here is the flashpoint that really brings it all into focus. It's a pretty provocative, pretty recent statement from the White House, and it pulls a major new player, India, right into the economic crossfire. See, this isn't just about Ukraine anymore, right? It's about who gets to trade with whom and what the fallout is going to be.
So how did we get here? Well, it all kicked off on the battlefield back in 2022, but almost right away, the West hit back with a massive economic war. For 2 years, the focus was all on hitting Russia directly, their finances, their energy, their tech. But now things are shifting. That battleground is getting bigger, and it's starting to pull in other countries, like India, into this economic brawl.
Okay, so to really get this, you have to look at Washington's side of the coin. From the very beginning, the main strategy from the West wasn't military, it was economic. And the goal? Well, it was pretty simple, really. Make the war so eye-wateringly expensive that Moscow just couldn't keep it going.
So, the strategy was basically this three-pronged attack. Think of it like this. First up, they went for the money. They cut Russia's big banks off from SWIFT, which is, the main pipeline for just about every global money transfer. Second, they tried to choke off the energy sector to slash the profits from oil and gas. That's Russia's main cash cow. And third, they blocked access to military tech like semiconductors to physically hobble their war machine.
And the sheer scale of this financial squeeze, it's huge. We're talking over $330 billion in Russian central bank assets just frozen. But here's what's really interesting, where that money is actually being held. While the US is often the public face of this, a massive 2/3 of those assets are sitting in the European Union. It just goes to show how lockstep the Western financial effort really is.
Yeah, and make no mistake, this was not just a slap on the wrist. The end game here was total financial isolation. The idea was to completely cut off the money and the tech to cripple Russia's war machine.
But of course, this is not a one-sided fight. Not at all. Russia has been playing its own strategic game, but on a totally different field. We're not talking about finance here. We're talking about ideas, about narratives, and about shaping global opinion.
And that's the big question, right? When you're up against that kind of economic firepower, what do you even do? Well, the answer is pretty clever, actually. You don't just fight the sanctions head-on. You go after the moral authority of the country that's putting them on you.
And this is basically the opening shot in that counter-offensive. Russia's foreign ministry comes out and accuses the U.S. of hypocrisy, saying it's using human rights and sanctions as a neo-colonial weapon to keep its top spot in the world. It's a really powerful story to tell, especially to the rest of the world, the countries in the global south.
So how do they do this? Well, they lean hard on a classic move. What about ism? It's that thing where you deflect a criticism by pointing out your accuser's own flaws. And Russia went all in. Their foreign ministry put out this huge report just detailing what it says are human rights failures happening right inside the U.S.
And this report, it's incredibly detailed. It's almost like they took the exact same categories the U.S. uses to critique other countries: systemic racism, political rights, all of it. The goal is crystal clear: knock America off its high horse. The message is, hey, you've got your own problems, so who are you to lecture us?
And you know what? This narrative is landing. It's finding an audience. So when the U.S. started talking about tariffs on India, India's response was, well, it was sharp. They called the move unjustified, and then they did exactly what Russia hoped for. They pointed out the hypocrisy, saying, hold on, the very same Western countries calling us out are still doing business with Russia themselves. Okay, so you've got these two big strategies clashing: the West's economic war and Russia's narrative war. And that brings us to the million-dollar question. After all this time, are the sanctions actually working? Well, here's where things get really counterintuitive. Against all the predictions, Russia's economy hasn't collapsed. In fact, the IMF is projecting that its economy is actually going to grow faster than the US and the euro area this year. I mean, how is that even possible? The answer seems to be something called military Keynesianism.
Basically, the government is pouring a ton of money into the war effort, and that massive spending is juicing the economy, creating this, well, powerful, even if it's maybe not sustainable, rebound.
But it's not just government spending. Russia's survival is also a masterclass in adaptation. They've pulled off this incredible economic pivot. Before the war, everything was pointed west. The European Union was their top trading partner. Now, completely cut off from Europe, their economic lifelines have swung east. China and India are now the main event.
So Russia has basically written a new playbook for how to survive this stuff. First, they're using a shadow fleet, these tankers that are off the books basically, to sell their oil and get around the price caps. Second, they've just rerouted all that energy to new friends like China and India. And third, and this is a big one, they're moving away from the US dollar. They're doing more and more business in their own currencies, building this whole new financial system that's designed to be sanctions-proof.
And if you want just one number that shows how massive this shift is, check this out. Before the war, maybe a quarter of their trade with China was done in their own currencies. Today, it's a whopping 92%. That is a huge, huge move away from the dollar.
So, what's the final verdict on all this? Look, the sanctions are definitely having a real impact. They're causing all sorts of disruptions, and they are hurting Russia's future growth, for sure. But they haven't been that knockout punch the West was hoping for. The Russian economy is definitely bruised, but it is nowhere near broken.
All right, so that brings us to the big picture. What does this all mean going forward? Because this is bigger than just one conflict now. We're looking at a fundamental change in how global power works.
A lot of experts are starting to call this a new Cold War. But this one's different. The big fight isn't over nuclear weapons. It's being fought with economics, over who controls supply chains, and with these totally competing ideas about how the world should be run.
And this quote from the Russian Foreign Ministry, it just perfectly captures their whole attitude. They don't see this as some short-term crisis they just need to weather. They see it as a long-term, historic struggle. In their view, they're on the right side of history, riding this wave of change away from a world dominated by the West. And they are absolutely digging in for the long haul. And so that leaves us with one final, huge question. In a world where wars are fought with sanctions and with stories, who actually holds the power? Is it the country with the dollar? Or is it the nations that can successfully push back, that can write a new story and build a new kind of world order? Honestly, the answer to that is probably going to define geopolitics for the next decade.